This is an extract from the Leader podcast by the Evening Standard, hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for us on your podcast provider.
And if you look at death,
Armed with sheets of paper loaded with graphs, US President Donald Trump tried to convince Axios journalist Jonathan Swan that the US is doing an incredible job fighting coronavirus. It didn't go to plan.
take a look. Right here. Here's case death.
Oh, you're doing death as a proportion of cases. I'm talking about death as a proportion of population. That's where the US is really bad.
Well,
Much worse than South Korea, Germany, etc.
you can't do that. You have
Why
to go.
can't I do that?
That clip and others from the Axios on HBO interview have been pinging around social media, gleefully picked up by the president's opponents with just 3 months until the US election. They're calling it a car crash. But can interviews like this, good or bad, really influence voting? Well, the Evening Standard's diary editor Ayesha Hazarika was once an advisor to Labour, and she's here now. Ayesha, how would you rate the president's performance?
Well, it kind of makes it's sort of up there with kind of Prince Andrew's like interview with Emily Maitlis. I mean, but the thing is with Trump is that he will have come away from that thinking, good job, really good, bigly good job, because by the end of it, the sort of journalist did look quite beaten down, and he almost looked a bit like, I can't quite believe what's happening because this is so surreal. And I think that's why that will probably benefit Trump in a way, because so much of this is polarized. If you don't like Donald Trump, and let's be honest, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, you think, oh, this is more proof that he is an affront to the office of President of the United States. But if you're a Trump supporter, you're like, this guy's an outsider, he's a maverick, he doesn't play by the rules. I think, again, it depends whether you're a fan or not, if you're a believer or not.
I wondered when he was pulling out his papers and going through his graphs and stuff, it looked to me like somebody had been trying to do a lot of preparation, but as he was talking, either he was going off script or he just hadn't done enough prep for the interview. How important is the prep for something like this, Aisha?
Well, the prep is so important, but the prep is important if you respect the format and if you respect the interview and you actually respect the program and you respect the media. If you decide that you don't care though, and that you think the media are fundamentally bad and you're just not going to play their game, then I suppose prep doesn't matter. You just bowl in, you just have your kind of 3 sound bites in your head that you want to get out. I don't think it looked like he'd done much prep at all, but I don't think he preps for anything, David. I think that's not his style of governance. Although, to be fair, he's not the only one. I mean, Boris Johnson is not known for being a great prepper. In fact, one of the descriptions of Boris Johnson is that he's a sort of an exam crisis type of leader, like leave everything to the last minute and kind of wing it. We're sort of almost used to it now. What would really blow our minds is if Donald Trump came out to do an interview. He was well briefed, he was polite, he was lucid, he was cogent, and he answered all the questions. We'd be like, whoa, what is going on? Mind blown.
I tell you what, right, Aisha, years ago, like years and years and years ago, I was in my 20s and I went for a job. I think it was for the Department of Trade and Industry as a press officer, right?
That's where I used to work.
Well, there you go. You maybe got the job I didn't because I was such a disaster. Such a disastrous interview. I just got everything. Talk about people not prepping. I didn't prep for this. One of the questions they asked me, bear in mind I was a journalist at the time, one of the questions they asked me is, why do politicians do live interviews? And I was like, I have no idea. But I kind of still don't know, Aisha. Why do they put themselves through this? What can they win?
Well, it's actually a very interesting question. So I would say that when I was a press officer, when I got your job at the Department of Trade and Industry, which would have been around, I was there from like 2000 to 2005. That was my little stint there. So back in the day, pre-social media, doing live television interviews, and particularly before the advent of 24-hour news, But doing those TV interviews that got you into the homes of the public, they used to have, they were must-see programs. As time has gone on, and I think this is very interesting in terms of, you see what Trump is doing now, you see a little bit of what Dominic Cummings and Number 10 is doing now, you saw a bit of it with Jeremy Corbyn as well, because the media has proliferated and now there is social media, and many senior figures have, more followers than newspapers have circulation or TV shows have viewing figures. They feel very much like they aren't beholden to these kind of slots anymore. They can pump out their own image, their own message, and they can make films, they can make news, they can make propaganda if they like, and their followers will kind of lap it up. So I think there's always been a convention in British politics, whether you're a journalist or whether you're an advisor, that there are things that really matter. But I think as time is going on, that orthodoxy is being challenged, and we've seen it on all sides. There's a slightly more fractious relationship now. I mean, there's always been a difficult relationship between the press and politicians. That's never been easy, but it feels like it's becoming, even more fractured.
Yeah, and we had that issue about Boris Johnson not doing an interview with Andrew Neil, didn't we, before the last election? Can interviews like that, did that, what we called the car crash interview with Jeremy Corbyn and Andrew Neil, does that affect voting at all?
Yes, I think it does, because I mean, people aren't glued to every single political program, but if you have a moment that goes really badly wrong for a political leader, so for example, when Andrew Neil kept asking Jeremy Corbyn if he would apologise, I think it was on anti-Semitism, and he just would not, I think he didn't say sorry, or he just wouldn't give an answer that sort of satisfied Andrew Neil, and he kept going at him. That moment went viral, and so it wasn't just people who were watching the TV show. The clip then got seen by millions and millions of people. But there's a sweet spot for politicians, and this is really important. You should be able to go in and do a testing big interview. You must be prepped, but you should do it with a level of ease. If you are straining a sinew, or like there's a blood vessel bursting in your eye because you're so stressed, and you're straining to remember like the answer to every question like it's an exam, like it's a viva, then you're not going to come across as a strong leader or a good communicator. The sweet spot is being well prepared, so you are across the issues, but you have to have a constant base level of knowledge and understanding about what's happening in politics and policy. But also you have to know what you actually think and believe, and no advisor should write that out for you. That should come from your heart. That should be your values. That should be your ideology. That should be what your political mission is. And I think sometimes the mistake that so doing too little prep is terrible, but sometimes people over prep and they stick to the line so rigidly that they sound like machines. They don't sound like human beings.
Yeah, this is kind of bringing up that classic JFK Nixon thing, isn't it? When they did the debate and JFK looked great on television, Nixon kind of looked kind of straight and didn't really appear to be exuding confidence, did he? And it just makes that massive difference. I wonder how Donald Trump and Joe Biden are going to square off when their debate comes up, because that election is just a few months away.
It is less than 100 days away. I mean, that is going to be fascinating, because at the moment Joe Biden has done pretty well in the polls, and the polls are looking really good for him. And one of the interesting things is Joe Biden's done really well by basically shielding and hiding away and saying very little and being very invisible. There's a lot of commentators who have argued that by sort of gently vacating the pitch, he's made the contest COVID versus Trump, which is actually quite smart, because Trump is losing that battle to COVID. Trump will probably not do that much prep. Biden will be doing so much prep for that, because that is going to be the debate of, those debates are going to be so critical to Biden, like probably the most important debates he'll ever do in his life.